Hello, welcome. Thank you for taking the time and sharing space with us today. I wanted to just start by giving a couple housekeeping remarks, and I'll reiterate these a little bit later. But we very much want this to be a discussion, a conversation. We have one of our own here today, Inette Dishler, to talk about her time at UC Berkeley and all the things that she's learned. If you could use the raise hand function, if you have any questions, we're going to be calling on folks, and you can also use the chat for questions. And we will do our best to keep an eye on the chat and ask those questions. And we also encourage you to use the raise hand function so you can use your voice and we can hear you. Again, this is very much a dialogue, a conversation. And so we want you to unmute yourself and use your voice and engage. So with that, I want to really welcome Inette Dishler. She's Senior Learning and Development Specialist from People and Culture here on campus. She's been on campus nearly 20 years, and she is retiring in just a few days. So that means that we got her just in time. Inette has, if you read her bio, you know that Wisdom Cafe is her brainchild. She's co-founder of the NOW conference that so many of us know and love and have benefited from. She's created and worked on numerous workshops from leadership and development to coaching. And the workshop that I was so excited to be a part of, that's LSEP, standing for Leadership and Career Enhancement Program for Staff of Color. So Inette and others, if you will just indulge me for just a second, I wrote something about Inette last year, and as part of my introduction, I would just like to read that for everyone now. So I am extremely grateful to Inette Dishler for the service she provides to the UC Berkeley community, particularly her recent work coordinating and managing the groundbreaking Leadership and Career Enhancement Program for staff of color. Inette's vision, voice, and her capacity to move from ideas to action for the benefit of staff is a genuine asset for our institution. Having the opportunity to participate in LSEP has empowered me in ways that I couldn't have anticipated or imagined. In speaking with Inette, it is clear that she is committed to developing and empowering staff in meaningful ways. And I have already learned from her during our short time working together on projects. One example of Inette's impact can be illustrated in her idea to host a workshop on imposter syndrome for all LSEP nominees. Inette was able to leverage the workshop so that all nominees were able to benefit, even if they were not ultimately able to join the LSEP cohort series. Moreover, leadership and nominators also benefited from the workshop so that they have a greater awareness of what many staff members grapple with. Personally and professionally, the workshop was pivotal for me and my own self-awareness, so much so that I shared the experience with my supervisors, and we replicated the workshop for our staff here at Berkeley Law. Inette exhibits exactly the kind of leadership, drive, and commitment that we need here on campus. Her work has motivated me to become more engaged and involved with issues that I care about on campus, and her ability to speak truth to power is inspirational. Inette is an ally, mentor, and a powerful agent of change. I am so, so glad that you can be with us today, Inette. I would like to encourage everyone to unmute yourself and give Inette a big, warm welcome of applause.
Yay.
Hey, Inette.
Thank you, Thembian. I warned Thembian not to make me cry. I don't want to get this talk started in tears. I am so honored to be with all of you today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm honored to be part of the celebration of Staff Appreciation Week. Thank you for this kind invitation. As you heard, I have 4 more days of work, and then I will retire with 20 years of service at UC Berkeley. It's been quite a ride, and it is bittersweet to be leaving this special place and wrapping up a 32-year career. Let me share some of my reflections, lessons, and tips with you. I have a master's degree in higher education administration, and I have visited and worked at several other universities. And I can tell you that even in the world of higher ed, there is no place like Berkeley. It is special because of all of you and all of the amazing people who work and study here. We have some of the brightest faculty, staff, and students anywhere, and everyone is committed to using their talents, intelligence, and creativity to make this world a better place. And God knows we need that now. Berkeley is also an absolutely maddening place. We have the most bureaucratic and Byzantine procedures and decision-making processes, a lack of accountability, a history of low trust and risk intolerance, and structural racism, in spite of our believing that we model the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It has not been easy to succeed here, and yet I wouldn't trade those challenges to be anywhere else. I am unique among staff at Berkeley because I have basically been in the same job and same department the entire time I've been here. But no 2 years have ever been the same. I have had 11 different bosses, and my unit has had 7 different names. But it's the constant newness of the work that has made this a remarkable experience. I have reinvented myself and reinvented the work many times over. My role is as a senior learning and development specialist, and my 32-year-long career has been as a learning and development professional. I have stayed engaged professionally throughout my career, and I consider myself a thought leader in my field. I have been very fortunate that my role has allowed me to pursue projects, programs, and passions that support all our staff at Berkeley. I have gotten to know and work with staff from all across the campus and at all levels of the organization. That has helped me feel like I have a true sense of the staff experience here, and I know what's working and where the pain points are. I know most of the cabinet and many of the deans. I have cultivated relationships because I understand that that is how you get anything done, and because that is where the greatest rewards of being here come from. As I reflect on my accomplishments, they seem to fall into 5 categories: new initiatives, projects, programs, trainings and facilitations, and service. I am lucky to have successfully started, managed, and led many different initiatives that each started with a vision I had for something that would benefit our staff. I believed in the ideas and I pushed to make them happen, even when that sometimes meant waiting out changes in bosses and leadership until someone was in place who would get it and support the idea. Some of those initiatives included starting the NOW conference for staff. This is our annual free career development conference for all our staff, and it has grown from 240 participants the first year to 1,200 expected this year. I created the original Wisdom Cafe website. I was studying the future of learning and the future of work, and I knew that people learn differently now than we did in the past. Social learning is how we learn today, from other people informally and in social networks. So I had a vision to build an interactive social learning website so Berkeley's staff could learn with and from one another, I knew nothing about developing websites, but I led with my vision and partnered with people who had the technical skills to build it, and that became the Wisdom Cafe. I started the Thriving as a Manager at Berkeley speaker series. This series matched senior leaders with faculty experts on critical and relevant topics to help our managers succeed here. I started the Leadership and Career Enhancement Program, LCEP, for our staff of color. This wonderful program has now graduated 4 cohorts, and the participants are some of the finest staff I've ever been privileged to know. The program has been very impactful for their careers and their lives. I started the constituent board to work on the organizational change needed to address our structural and institutional racism. And I pushed a vision to build a coaching culture here at Cal that includes the Growing as a Coach training for managers, the new Cal Coaching Network Community of Practice, local coaching circles, and more that will change the nature of the manager and staff relationship to one that is more open, empowering, and supportive. I've also worked on many different campus and system-wide projects, such as the Advisor Development Project, the Student Affairs Workforce Development Task Force, and the UC People Management Initiative. I ran the former Leadership Development Program, LDP, for several years that put through over a couple hundred staff and produced 16 strategic projects for the campus. I've trained thousands of staff in many different classes and facilitated retreats and meetings for many different departments. I've presented to several campus, system-wide, and international meetings and conferences. And I'm proud of the many kinds of service that I've given, including mentoring countless staff, serving on the Chancellor Staff Advisory Committee for 3 years, serving on the Diversity Facilitators Network, and current participation in the Dismantling Racism group. So here are 7 tips that I've learned from all of that. 1, spend time and energy on people. Get to know all sorts of different people in different roles and build real relationships. This has been the best part of working here and what I will miss the most. 2, advocate for yourself and advocate for others who need support and a voice. You are part of a community. Participate in it fully. 3, use your experience, skills, and knowledge and ideas to help others and help the institution. Offer what you can. Be generous. 4, be willing to fight for your ideas and persist to make them happen. Advice I was given when I got here was to have patience and take the long view. And that's still good advice today. I wouldn't have accomplished any of the things I mentioned before if I had taken no for an answer. 5, don't accept the status quo. Challenge what's broken and make it better. We may be known for our excellence, but we can't rest on our laurels. There is still much that can be made better. 6, lead from where you are. Leadership is not about roles and titles and levels. My definition of leadership is 3 simple words: exerting positive influence. You can do that from anywhere. And 7, never stop learning and growing. Let your curiosity lead you to new exploration, adventures, and knowledge, and then apply all that in new ways. Surprise yourself. We are clearly at a critical moment in time. Our country, and indeed the world, is sick and on fire. Our economy is in shambles. Our democracy is in peril. Our campus is empty and quiet. Our future path is uncertain. All of these truths are frightening and overwhelming. and Cal is the best place to be right now. This great institution can help us overcome all these challenges with expert information, new discoveries, and idealistic and determined students. And you, the staff, are the backbone of it all. I know Chancellor Christ and Erwin and Eugene and many of our leaders have said this repeatedly, and I know they believe it. I am one of you, and I have lived it. You make it possible for this place to thrive and be a beacon for the world. You. Don't ever diminish or doubt your value. Fight to be seen and heard, because we can't afford to discount anyone's ideas and energy right now. William Penn said, "Time is what we want most, but what we use worst." I have tried to make the most of my time at Cal. I hope you do the same. Thank you for everything you do every day. You are awesome. And of course, go Bears. Thank you.
Woo! Yeah. Please, everyone, join me in giving Inette a big hand. Yes, and go Bears. So we have one of our own here today. I'd like everyone to move into a gallery view. Feel free to unmute yourselves. And why don't we ask Inette a few questions? I'll get us started and ask a question. And I think, let's see. Here's one. Was there a career setback you faced that you later realized was an advantage? Can you talk about some of the struggles you've had during your career, Inette?
Sure. Hitting me with a softball question right off the bat.
You know.
All right, setbacks. So in my career, I've been laid off 3 times. And each time I was devastated and thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me and had no idea what would happen next and how I'd be okay. And each time, with hindsight, being able to look back at what happened in those circumstances and where it took me, I realized that I benefited every time. What seemed like a crisis in the moment turned out to be a blessing. And I think that's something that's just an advantage of getting older and gaining the benefit of hindsight and gaining wisdom, is that you can see those things that you thought were just the worst thing that could ever happen to you turn out to be blessings in disguise. And that's benefited me as I've mentored other staff who have faced layoffs, who have gone through hard times and setbacks in their careers, to know that we come out on the other side of it and we can be better for it.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. You talked a bit about using our voice and fighting for our ideas and trying to be heard and being heard. And I know for me, you've really helped facilitate that. What are some strategies that you might think about that maybe we can offer to our colleagues here on how to go about that, how to be heard? Another softball.
Well, you know, I think it's important that you believe in what you have to say. It's easier to fight for something, to fight to be heard, when what you want to be heard about is something that really matters to you and you believe matters to others. So that initially, if people are not paying attention or shut you down or won't listen, that gives you that strength to believe in yourself and believe in what you're passionate about and why it matters, so that you can keep coming back and trying again. I've observed many, many, many leaders in my career. I've studied leadership. I've taught leadership at the college level. I've run leadership programs. And as I observe leaders, one of the things that is important to me is that the leaders I respect the most are those who will seek the truth and speak the truth. So I've tried to be one of those people that speaks truth. And it's not always easy. You know, people don't always want to hear it. But when I've really believed that what I had to say was important and mattered, then I just keep speaking.
Yeah, yeah. I hear that. That definitely resonates. Thank you, Inette. It looks like we have a question from Ramona. How do you avoid getting thoroughly discouraged, angry, bitter after a layoff?
Thanks, Ramona, for that question. You know, I think it's normal to get discouraged and angry and bitter from a layoff. It's hard to go through that. And, you know, and there's so much uncertainty around layoffs and what's going to happen to you next, and what you can make happen for yourself next. So I think it's perfectly normal and okay to go through, you know, those kind of emotions. But you can't get stuck there. So, you know, then what's important is that, you know, at some point you say, all right, what are my next steps? And what can I learn from this experience? And how do I help this make me a stronger person? And maybe make a change that I was reluctant to make. When I got laid off twice in a year from another university because of budget cuts, I used that as a pivot point for me to move into the private sector and get some experience that I knew I needed to learn about the business world and learn how to do consulting work. And that was going to be important for my career. And I had resisted it. I'd resisted going into the private sector. I'd resisted, you know, the ethical conflict I was going to have with the mission of the private sector. But I knew it was experience I needed. And so when I went through those two painful layoffs in a row, you know, I said, I have to use this for my benefit. And that's how I got over the emotions of it and got myself on a path and finally made that move that I'd avoided. And it was a good move that I needed to make. And I did that for a few years. And as you know, now got back into higher ed, where I can feel good about my values being aligned with the mission of what we do. But that experience was really pivotal in my career. So feel your feelings and then figure out how to make them work for you to move forward.
Great, thank you. So I just want to encourage everyone, you can put questions in the chat and you can also use the raised hand function. We'd really like to hear your voice. This is very much a dialogue and a discussion. This is our one opportunity with Inette before she walks out of the UC Berkeley door and retires. And we want to thank her for spending this time with us. We do have another question in the chat from Ann Bloom. Hi, Ann. How did you develop confidence in the truth of what you think?
Wow. Man, that's a great question, and that's a hard question. You know, I think a lot of that was helped by two mentors I've had in my career. So I've had two formal mentors, both very strong women. One was when I was an undergraduate, and I was a student leader in my university, and there was a woman who worked on campus who was the advisor to the organization I was leading. And so she had to work with me very closely all the years that I was there as an undergrad, and she really became my first mentor. Just seeing her as a model of somebody who was so strong and so smart and so competent helped me a lot to learn skills that I've carried throughout my whole life, to see leadership really modeled and the kind of leader that I wanted to be, the kind of person I wanted to be. And that's carried forward to the second woman who became my next mentor, similar model of a very strong, competent, capable, intelligent woman that I learned from watching her. And so respecting each of them and their voices and the ways that they made change happen all around them. And I've just tried to follow what I learned from them.
Thanks, Inette. You've been such a great model for me and for so many of us here on campus. It's really interesting that you talk about the mentor relationship and trying to find those people who will take you under their wing, people that model what you want to be. That's a great takeaway. You talked about these mentors being very strong leaders, and I've seen you're extremely busy. I wonder if you're working all the time. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what your schedule has looked like, and how you can find ways for self-care and a work-life balance. So much seems to be expected of us, maybe more than should be expected of us. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I don't know that I really buy into the concept of work-life balance. I think that that's a standard that a lot of people set themselves up against, and I don't really think that's a real thing, that you can have total balance. We're at work, the majority of our waking hours. So there's not really balance of that to the time we have in our personal lives. And I think when you push against that all the time, that's a struggle that feels really frustrating and exhausting. So I think the way I look at it is more about work-life integration and boundaries, and moving away from this notion that, work has to be this 9 to 5, and then, you go home and you have this, 5 to whatever until you go to bed, and then the rest of your time is asleep. People work on different schedules with different ways their energy works. Some people do better at night, some people are early morning people. So I think finding a way that just kind of integrates in a better flow for you of how to get your things done in your life. And especially now when we're working remotely, I think it's actually more doable to make those adjustments, to make your work and your life work better together, and figure out, how to move in a flow of your day. For me, I've always been able to set good boundaries. So I've worked very hard. In the office, I was coming in the office 7:15 in the morning. I was there, always till at least 5. I worked very hard every day. Excuse me. But I was really good at boundaries, and I generally did not take my work home. I started earlier in my career. I did some time as a therapist and working in residential settings. And I learned then that if you took your work home, you couldn't function. It was too emotional and painful and all absorbing, and you just couldn't function. So I learned then how to really set boundaries and have separation of work and the rest of my life. So I don't work all night. I don't work all weekend. I don't check my email when I'm not working. I've tried to be really good about that. If I'm on vacation, I try to really be on vacation, really take vacation. So I think it's important for people to figure out for yourselves, just how does that flow work best for you, and make it work for you. And then have good boundaries, but don't try to struggle against some elusive notion of balance. It just feels like a setup, especially for a lot of women who are also, dealing with their families and childcare. I think it's an unreasonable standard. So I hope that you all give yourselves some permission to think differently about how you do that.
Great, thank you. Anya Grossman has a question. How do you slow yourself down when your ideas and enthusiasm go faster than the bureaucracy allows?
That's a tough one. Yeah. Because that's where that impatience comes in that I was advised about right from the very beginning, how you have to have patience and take the long view. You know, because if you have good ideas, you want to make things happen, you know, it gets very frustrating to push up against those wheels of the bureaucracy. And you know, to recognize the time it really takes to make things happen. So, you know, slowing myself down. I don't know. I don't know that I've done that very well. You know, I just keep pushing forward. I've had to put on the back burner, you know, ideas that I've had for things because I can't do everything at once. I had an idea for a big passion project that I really wanted to do before I retired, and I just couldn't get to it. There are too many other things that I was already doing, and there was no other space. So, you know, that's unfortunate. And I'm sure I would always be in that situation. There's never a perfect time when I would say, I'm finished. I've done everything I ever wanted to do, and I could put a nice bow on it and walk away. So at some point you just have to acknowledge you can't do everything. And I've taken on, you know, as much and more than I could and pushed through to keep doing it, and hoped I would get to that next thing.
Thank you. Your colleague James Dudek has a question here. Inette, you are renowned for having an extensive and comprehensive campus network that you have developed over 2 decades. What are some tips to building a network at Cal? Great question.
Well, thank you, James. And you are the other person that I think of as the best networker I know. And you know, I know we've talked about this and how important networks are, and we've both spent a lot of time and energy helping people build networks, and encouraging people to grow their networks. As I said earlier, you know, I think building relationships with people is the most rewarding part of being there, and that comes through expanding your circles and growing those networks. And we have so many different ways to do that on campus, with all of our fantastic staff organizations, our affinity groups, our communities of practice, things that you can get involved with. There's committee work to do. Get involved in things that help you meet people, that help you learn new things from other people, that help you contribute to the organization in new and different ways, that help you share your knowledge and experience. There's so many options out there. And I think the saddest thing for me is when somebody just comes in and they just do their job and they're totally defined by their job description and they're in their bubble of their unit or their department or their school, and they never venture beyond that, because there's so much that's so rich and rewarding on our campus for you to take advantage of. So getting out there and experiencing what there is to experience and making yourself a part of those things is really how you grow a network. And I really encourage you to do that. And in particular, to reach out and meet people who are different than you. Meet people who have different jobs, work in different fields, you know, that in every way you can think of are different from you. That is how you really expand your perspectives, your lens on the world, your ideas. And so you've got to make that an intentional effort to get out there and meet other people and really grow that network broadly.
Wonderful. We have another question from Katera. Hi, Inette. Congratulations on your retirement. Thank you for sharing your wonderful list with us. What are some trainings or workshops that you have led or attended that you felt were pivotal for your professional personal development?
Hi, Katera. Thank you for that. You know, I think earlier on in my career, before I came here, what was pivotal for me was getting involved in my professional association. So there is an international association for learning and development professionals, and I got involved with them early on in my career. I got on the board of my local chapter of that organization. I went to all their international conferences and interacted, with people who had been in the field for a long time. And so all of that was really incredibly important and helpful for me, learning about my field and growing myself as a learning and development professional. So that was early on. I've been, fortunate to participate in so many different programs and trainings and classes throughout my career. And I've learned something from all of them. What I recommend now to staff, is to take advantage of all the training and development opportunities that we have on campus. There's so much. There's so much offered by the people and organization development team that you can search the HR website for the grow pages and find all the ways that you can grow yourself, grow your career, grow your skills, etc. There's other parts of the campus that offer learning and development opportunities, like the multicultural education program, the Ombuds office that offers training, the Be Well at Work group that offers all kinds of programs. There's so much, it's such a richness. And I just encourage you to explore it and widely take advantage of the different offerings that are out there and find those things that are really meaningful for you and will make the difference for you and how you grow your own career. There's fantastic career counseling. There's one-to-one career coaching you can get from the people in organization development team, from Lisa Riker. You can schedule yourself appointments to have a coach and take career development workshops. There's just so much. And I can't possibly name it all. If you're a manager or a supervisor, I highly, highly, highly recommend the Berkeley People Management Program and all the classes in there, because it really makes a difference to learn to be a good manager. But there's so much there. So please explore, go to the websites, look for what all these options are, and just try them out.
Thanks, Inette. Thanks for mentioning the one-on-one coaching opportunities that are available. What an incredible resource that is. I know about that, but I have forgotten about it. So thank you for that reminder. I'm going to sign up.
Yeah, I'm happy to remind you, because, if you were going out in the world and finding yourself a coach, you'd be spending hundreds of dollars an hour for those coaching services. And you get the advantage of a fantastic coach on our own campus for free. All of those things I mentioned are free to you. And that it's just not like working in other organizations. It's incredible what we offer to all our staff. So absolutely don't miss out on those opportunities and take advantage of it. I think I saw Angela pop a link up in the chat that can take you to some of that website information.
Perfect. Thank you, Angela. Man, this is just such good information. There's our staff, our colleagues, they're coming from so many different places, looking at different opportunities, looking at how to professionally develop. And so these are just this is gold. Thank you. We have another question. And the question is, can you talk more about your work with the constituency board addressing structural racism at Cal?
Sure. So there's a big initiative called Developing a More Equitable and Inclusive Environment for Staff. And within that initiative, there's two main pieces of it. One is the LCEP program that Fembian talked about in the introduction and I mentioned as well. And the other is the constituent board. So the program is really to help our individual staff of color to grow their skills and grow their careers. The constituent board is really about looking at the organizational change work that needs to happen to address our policies, procedures, structures that are in place that historically and persistently have been barriers to our staff of color succeeding in our organization. And we know that our leadership of our organization does not look like our staff. And it doesn't look like the population of the state of California. So how do we really look at what's impeding that from happening, from that progress happening? And look at the accountabilities that need to be in place, the measures that we want to have, the strategy around dealing with that institutional and structural racism so that we can make those significant changes to our organization. And that would change the whole future of the organization. So the constituent board is a fantastic group of stakeholders from all across campus, including many graduates from our LCEP program, who bring their voices and their unique place they're situated in the organization, the work that they do, to help us identify all of those places where there's room for that kind of change and improvement. And then the board is tasked with really identifying the key priorities and metrics and accountabilities to put in place and making that change happen.
Great, thank you. Do we receive any, is there reporting out or any information about findings that come from the constituency board?
Well, the board's only a couple years old. And so there have been reports that have gone back to cabinet. Our two executive sponsors are Mark Fisher and Oscar Dubon. So they're both cabinet members, and so they report back. And certainly the chancellor is apprised of, what the board's working on. There hasn't been a public report to campus. We've met with the Council of Ethnic Staff Organizations, CISO, regularly. They get updates, and the cabinet. But there hasn't been a comprehensive report written that's been publicly distributed. But I'm sure that that will come now that we have our new director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, Lasana, who just started yesterday. So I am furiously trying to onboard him and transition all of that work to his good hands to be the caretaker of it going forward. And so we're spending a lot of hours together this week to make sure that that happens. But now that we have somebody in that role, I think that will really help move those things forward, and the campus will hear more about it.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, never a dull moment. Super busy on your way out, huh, Inette?
Yes, there's no coasting out. There's
no coasting.
No.
We have another question from Ramona. How do the opportunities differ for academic staff? So I guess training opportunities, workshops, et cetera. And I don't know if it does differ. So if you could talk about that a little bit.
So by academic staff, I'm going to assume, Ramona, that you mean staff who have academic titles other than faculty and that work in academic departments. If that's what you mean, then the opportunities really aren't different. All those staff members are also fully able to take advantage of all the opportunities I mentioned before. The resources for communities of practice, staff organizations, and all the learning and development opportunities exist for all staff, whether you have an academic title or not.
And she does specify a little bit, librarians, lecturers, so I believe that still falls in the same category that you described, Inette.
Yep.
Okay, great. So we have another question. If you could choose one issue for Cal to focus on in terms of staff satisfaction, what would it be and why? And I'll read that one more time. If you could choose one issue for Cal to focus on in terms of staff satisfaction, what would it be and why?
Well, I guess what I'd answer right now is where my passion really has been most recently, and I definitely don't feel complete about it, which is the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work. We need to be an institution where every single person who's part of our community feels that they can show up as their full selves, their full identities, their full selves with their experiences, their skills, their knowledge, their backgrounds, their ideas, their passions, and all of who they are. And so we need to have an environment that reflects diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging so that everybody really can show up that way, that everybody feels like they belong, that everybody really does belong, that everybody's voices matter, that opportunities exist for everyone to maximize their potential and contribute in all the ways that they can and want to. So I think when we can get to that goal, that will be incredibly impactful for all our staff to feel more engaged, more a part of our institution.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And I couldn't agree more. Let's see. Are there any other questions?
I'm going to just jump in and ask Inette a little bit about the Cal Coaching Network. And I feel like it's such a fantastic resource that wouldn't have existed on campus, 10 or 15 years ago. So if you could talk a little bit about how the coaching model helps staff develop in their roles and how that's kind of unfolded historically over the past, say, 10 years in the world of work.
Well, thank you, Nancy. Yeah, the idea of us having a coaching culture is something I've talked about for many years. And I know that organizations that lead with a strong coaching culture have higher rates of engagement, productivity, other things. And so I've known that as our workforce demographics have shifted, that we needed to rethink the role of the manager in our organization and how managers interact with their staff. Right now, we have a predominantly millennial workforce in our demographics. And what millennials expect from their managers is very different than what older staff have expected. For baby boomers, for older staff, we looked at managers as knowledge experts and authority figures. If we had questions, we went to your manager. That's how you got your answers, your information. And now, people don't want their manager to be an authority figure, and they don't go to their manager to get their questions answered. They use all their networks. They Google their questions, or they go to their social networks, or their colleagues and peers. So we really needed to rethink what the role of manager is. And what people want from their manager is coaching and feedback. They want somebody who's going to help them grow and develop and give them continuous coaching. So when we started talking about changing how we do performance management in our organization to make it something that was more valuable and useful for both staff and managers, I knew that was the opening to talk again about this idea of a coaching culture, because we were only going to be able to transform our performance program if we really incorporated that notion of continuous conversations and coaching between managers and staff. So then I noticed the receptivity to the idea, and we were able to build it into the approach we took to the Achieve Together performance program. And I was able to then research coaching models and frameworks out in the world to choose a model that we would introduce to campus, and so that every manager could be trained in the same approach to coaching and learn how to be a good coach. And we built the Growing as a Coach class, which we probably at this point trained 600 or 700 managers throughout campus on. And another part of the concept was to build a community of practice. So we started this Cal Coaching Network, CCN, and it launched last December. So all of this is still very new. When we launched CCN, we had over 200 people on an interest list. So as soon as we started talking about this idea of coaching, there was so much response to it in the organization, so many people that were interested in learning how to be coaches and how to be coached, how to do peer coaching. So coaching is for everyone. It's not just for managers. It's for everyone who can learn and benefit from this and participate as a peer coach, a coachee, or whatever role you're in. And so CCN, each of the sessions of the Cal Coaching Network presents some new content on coaching, and then there's opportunity to do some peer coaching practice right in the sessions. Even now, virtually, we're still having CCN sessions. We just had one a couple weeks ago, and there were 200 people virtually attending the program. It's just phenomenal. So we're moving in the right direction, clearly. People are very interested in this idea of coaching network and coaching culture. I've given many presentations around the organization about this concept of a coaching culture. And I think it's taking root, and it's starting to have some stickiness. And I think it's going to really transform how managers and staff relate to each other. So this idea of continuous conversations, of approaching the conversations from a coaching framework, and empowering and supporting staff to find their own solutions to the problems they're facing, to learn how to problem solve, to be empowered for their own growth and development.
Thanks so much. That's really helpful information.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I don't see any other questions. So if anyone does have a question, you should pop in now and let us hear it. I want to encourage everyone. We've got some really good links in the chat. And if you go to the corner where the 3 dots are, you can actually save the chat and keep those links. This session is recorded. So any of those who want to revisit any of this material can. And you can reach out to esu@law.berkeley.edu. And I just want to reiterate that Inette is an ally, a mentor, and a powerful agent of change. Not only is that reflected in this conversation today and throughout her career, but it also reflects in all of the workshops and programs that she's put together. She has empowered me and empowered us in so many ways, and I'm very grateful.
I have one last question, if it's okay. How do you stay
Yes.
hopeful in the world that we're in right now? I think that's just always interesting to hear people's, kind of perennial philosophy.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the idea that you gain wisdom as you get older, and looking back, you realize there's been other really bad times and hard times before, and we always come out the other side of them. So I mean, we are in a particularly difficult time, and there's a lot to be concerned about and worried about. But things will change. The nature of our organization, the nature of any of our jobs, and the nature of the world is dynamic. It's not static. Nothing is static. Nothing is staying exactly the same and will continue to stay exactly the same. Things keep changing. So, the more I've had to experience that in my own life, I've had to learn that lesson that to just not let myself get stuck anywhere and in that despair or hopelessness, because I know things will shift. And I just try to be part of the solution to have them shift in a way that is a positive direction to go, as much as I can. But knowing that change is going to happen is the easiest way for me to try and stay hopeful.
Yeah. Inette, we do have another question. It's from Jen Covens. Hi, Jen. How did you deal with so many different managers through your career? That's actually a really good question.
How did I deal with it? What did you mean by that in the question? It's certainly one of those things that kept changing. Was not static to just have one manager. I came here. Interestingly, it was very, very hard for me to decide to accept the job here at Cal. I was offered this position once. I was living in Florida, and I turned it down. And I said, I'm not changing my whole life and uprooting everything and moving 3,000 miles across country. I don't know anybody in California. And I turned down the job. And I thought that was the end of the story. And 6 months later, out of the clear blue sky, I heard back from Cal again. And they had upgraded the position and wanted me to apply again. And I went through another whole agonizing round of that process and shocked myself that I ended up ultimately saying yes, and here I am 20 years later. One of the things that convinced me to say yes at that point was being convinced that the person who was the head of HR at that point in time was a real visionary, who completely believed in and supported learning and development work. And in a lot of HR departments, you don't get that. A lot of heads of HR see learning and development as a luxury, and when there's budget cuts, it's the first thing to go. And I was convinced that this person was fabulous. I got to talk to her on the phone, and that I was so excited to come and be part of her organization. And I got here, and 3 months later, she went out on a medical leave and never came back. So it's been like that, this revolving door, this perpetual cycle of changes, when there's been managers or directors or leaders that I've loved and never wanted them to leave, and people leave, things change. And so, I just have to look at it that I try to learn from every one of them. Some of them have been really difficult for me to work with, and I've not enjoyed those experiences. But I consider some of those people that I've had the hardest time with some of my best teachers. So I've just tried to learn from every one of them and figure out some reason they were put in my path, and what I can get out of that, and then move on and get to know the next person and hope to establish a really good, strong, collaborative working relationship with each one of them.
Wow, that's real. Yeah.
I'm seeing Lisa Reichert literally like waved her hand. So do you want to ask a question, Lisa?
Yeah, I just really wanted to make a comment. Inette is my current colleague, and when I worked at UC Berkeley over 10 years ago for the first time, she was my colleague then in HR. And Inette, you have just been such a wonderful colleague and friend, and I have learned so much from you over the years, and I admire your courage and your wisdom and your network and connections, and I have just learned so much from you. When I think of UC Berkeley, I mean, I can't not think of UC Berkeley without you, because you are the one constant that I've always known here. And I'm just really going to miss you, and I just want to thank you for being an inspiration. And I know we have such a different style. Like, I just so admire your leadership and your voice, and I've written down all of your points, and I'm going to like hold this wisdom dear, and when I need it, and think of you. And one question I do have for you is, so I would love to hear about your future. So as you envision your retirement, what's next? How will you apply your passion and your leadership?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Lisa, for what you said. And you are absolutely on that list of the people that I'm going to miss a lot leaving here. Well, my future, I didn't envision a future moving into retirement in a pandemic. So, so that's having me rethink some things and possibilities, at least in the short term, of what retirement can look like. But a couple of things that I have been thinking about. One is, what ways can I be of service in the world beyond UC Berkeley? And the other is, how do I take care of myself, do good self-care? And so in terms of the self-care, I've thought about having a better, more consistent exercise, workout kind of regimen, sleeping more, and just many different ways to, I've just started learning Qigong to do that more, to, just build some of those really good self-care practices. But in terms of how I want to still be of service in the world, I'm thinking about a couple different things. And one is to keep doing the diversity, equity, inclusion work that I've, loved doing on campus, and do it in the world. And I've already started talking to some friends about starting a group of people who want to do readings and discussions in that space and anti-racism work. And then also to throw myself more into the electoral process. We have 5 months before the most important election of our lives. And I want to use the time that I'm gaining to do a lot more get out the vote and that kind of effort. So those are the two things I've identified so far, until I can start traveling and going to visit family and friends and things like that on the other side of this pandemic. But thank you, Lisa.
All right. Thank you.
Inette.
I have another question too. I thought I'd just speak it
Go
out.
for it, Jen.
And hey, Thimby. I'm just wondering, like, how did you decide to retire? Like, did you decide a while ago, or like, what made you get to that point where you're like, all right, this is it, you know? When you seem young, like you're not.
Yeah, actually that was a hard decision, very hard decision. And I did not decide this a long time ago. I always had my goal to make my 20 years here at least. And I am retiring just at that point of having my 20 years in. But that didn't mean I was ready to leave at 20 years. That was kind of my baseline minimum. And, you know, I'm still very involved and invested in the work that I do on campus and, you know, my networks there and all the people. And it's a very, very hard decision to walk away from those things. And I can't even imagine not working, not having the kind of structure and accomplishments and all that of a career, you know. And I've worked since I was 15 years old. So it's like really weird to wrap your head around this idea of not working anymore. So it was a very hard decision. Frankly, it was primarily driven in this particular timing by some health considerations. And I want to retire when I'm healthy and I can do more to take care of myself to stay healthy. And that was kind of the push that I needed to make this decision now. So it's what I need to do. It's still a hard thing to accept, and it's not totally what I want to do. I mean, it's just a real bittersweet experience, but it's the right thing that I need to do right now for myself.
Thanks, Inette. We're proud of you for doing it for yourself. So we should close this out. I'd like everyone to unmute themselves so that we can give Inette a big hand for her joining us today. And happy birthday and congratulations on your retirement. Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Give it up.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Woo! Well, thanks everybody for coming out. Signing off.
Thanks, Themby.
What a treat. Thank you,
Thank you
Inette.
so much, Debbie Ann.
Absolutely,
Thanks,
Inette.
Debbie.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best.